My wife had booked us the tickets. She flies frequently for work. I've never left the state. On the way to the airport, she teased me about taking my first flight. It wouldn't have bothered me, but I was nervous. "Do you want me to buy a stuffed animal before we board?" she said. "Something for you to hold on when you get scared." She had kept it up as we made our way through the terminals, looking for the elusive Gate 53. None of the signs indicated a gate number that high. According to the signs, the airport only had 33 gates. "Don't worry," my wife said. "I always travel from this gate. It's around here." She guided us to the employees only door. "Are we allowed in here?" I said. "Of course," she said. She glanced around to make sure that nobody was watching us. Satisfied that all eyes looked elsewhere, she grabbed my collar and pulled me through the door. She sprinted down the stairs and I followed. There were no other passengers or anyone on the stairwell. We continued down for at least a dozen stories. We'd been on the ground floor in the terminal. "How can a plane possibly take off from this far below?" I said. "How do turbines spinning fast propel tons of metal off the ground?" she said. We continued downward. "I don't know," I said. "It sounds like you don't understand much about traveling," she said. I couldn't argue with that line of reasoning, but our current destination didn't become any less mysterious by her answer. We had reached a door. Scrawled over it was Gate 53, not officially stamped like all of the other gates and terminals. Gate 53 was hand-painted, in a strange font. I was too out of breath to question it. Nearly 60 people waited down there. My wife told me to stay put, to not talk to anyone while she conferred with the airline personnel. I didn't argue with her. None of the other passengers looked like anybody I'd want to associate with. All of them seemed off somehow. In high school, I had taken a ceramics class. The teacher kept a shelf of vases and bowls that didn't turn out right. He'd add to it all year long, and at the end of the year, we'd have Smashing Day, where all the students would come in and break apart all of the odd-looking ceramics. The people at Gate 53 were that shelf personified. A rotund man with a pencil mustache and a pinstripe suit eyed me. He slithered over and he smiled. "First time, isn't it?" "How could you tell?" I asked. "I recognize who you're with," he said. "Smart woman." "Thank you," I said. "She's my wife." He giggled. "Of course she is," he said. And she came back towards us. The rotund man slithered away. "What did he say?" she demanded. "He asked if it was my first time," I said. She looked angry. "That's all, really?" "I suppose that's all right," she said. She handed me a bronze bracelet. Dented into it was an inscription. I couldn't make out what it said, or even the language. And my wife wore an identical one. "Couples have to wear them," she said. "It's a law." I put mine on. It's a strange law, I thought. Nothing about flying made sense to me. One time I took the Amtrak downstate to see some friends who moved, and it wasn't anything like this. The stewardess passed boxes to my wife and I. No one sat in the seat between us. She opened her box right away and encouraged me to do the same. Inside I found a thick black hooded cloak with scarlet lining, and beneath that, a dagger and a masquerade mask. Long and square with no mouth. It was gold with decorations adorning the edges. "There's no reason I know the name of this mask," I said to my wife. "So why do I?" She already wore her cloak and mask, one identical to mine, and all the passengers wore them. Some had different masks. Colombianas, pantalones, Xanas, all colorful, exaggerated in their own strange ways. Why did I know their names? I never researched masquerades. I'd never been to any place people would wear such things. Put on your cloak and mask, my wife said, and keep your blade at hand. I got up instead. Sorry, I said. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Flying. It's not what I thought it would be. A stewardess came over to us. She too wore a cloak and a mask now. Is there a problem? She said. No, my wife said. She flashed her bracelet. He's just a first-timer, that's all. Not a problem. Well, keep him on his best behavior, the stewardess said. We don't want any more blood than necessary. And she walked away. More blood than necessary, I said. Why would that be necessary? A voice came over the loudspeaker. Folks, this is your captain. We'll begin the chanting starting from page 302, verse 4. Please prepare yourselves. Chanting begins in 5 minutes. Get yourself ready, my wife said. It won't do us any good if you're making a fuss once it all begins. The mask I wore was made of some sort of metal. It wasn't a cheap plastic Halloween one. Around the edges, leaves were engraved into the mask, like the leather pommel of the dagger I clutched. The mask had been used countless times before. My wife pulled out 2 leather-bound books from the seat pockets in front of us, and she opened hers, and then flipped through mine. Well, that won't do, she said and hit the button for the stewardess again. I glanced into the book open on her lap. Vomit crept up my esophagus. There were not letters on the pages. The arrangement of characters, whatever they were, hurt to stare at. The book slammed shut. Why did you look into that? My wife asked. No one said to do that. The stewardess approached us. Can he have a Latin phonetic book, please? My wife handed the stewardess a second leather-bound book. The stewardess came back with a newer, cloth-bound one, at least made in the past century. Inside it, all the pages were 2 columns of text, printed like a Bible. There were no recognizable words. Instead, there was a bunch of hyphenated collections of letters together like Phalo Kitai, Zo, Rar, Nizo. None of it made any sense. My wife opened the book to page 302 and handed it back. Verse 4, she said, starting any second now. Not long into the chanting, it had appeared. It was long, too tall to stand upright, so it bent over. Its body covered by a black cloak that trailed behind. From beneath its hood there was a mask. A volto, I thought. A mask that covers the whole face but with rounded edges, unlike the one that I wore. Insects were engraved across the mask, like they were spewing out of the eyes. The volto stretched out its arms, but they weren't arms. They were snakes or tentacles or vines, long strands twisted together, covered in slime and throbbing with sick life. They ended in a cluster of talons or needles or curved fangs. They pulsated. It roamed the aisle. We all kept chanting. I wanted to look at it, but I was terrified. My wife guided my head back to the book in front of me, and I'm glad she did. Otherwise, I might have made eye contact with the volto. Gotten a glimpse of what was underneath the mask. I imagine nothing good would have come from that. The volto moved from row to row, removing the hood from each passenger and placing its sharp clusters on the back of their necks. I couldn't concentrate on the chanting any longer. Whatever this thing was, it made my body shudder. Eventually, it came to our row. The volto removed my wife's hood and placed its needle fang-like talons on the back of her neck. She kept chanting as it did so, as if nothing was wrong. It pulled my hood down. I felt exposed. It was only a thin layer of cloth, but I wished that it still separated me from it. There was no sting, no pain, no needle penetrated my skin. Maybe it numbed you, I thought. It lingered on the back of my neck, longer than it did for anyone else. I thought of my ceramics class, breaking the odd vases and bowls with a hammer. Like many teenage boys, I'd love destroying things. A girl in my class, Margot, made an ugly bowl earlier in the semester. She wanted to take it home anyways, but our teacher put it on a shelf. I kept teasing her that I was going to break it on Smashing Day, and she said that she'd get to it first, rescue it. But on the day, I beat her to the classroom, and I waited, holding a hammer over the bowl. I brought it down as soon as she had walked in through the doorway, and I laughed at my own pathetic attempt at a joke. Margot stood in the doorway until my eyes met hers, so I could see her tears. Only then did she leave. We'd been friends before that moment, but not after. I didn't learn real, genuine empathy until I had my first child, and I worry most men don't either. I wondered if I was a deformed bull, and if the Volta would destroy me. That experience replayed itself again and again as it touched the back of my neck. But the Volta moved on, to the next row, and the next. Did this mean that I wasn't deformed? Or was the Volta more empathetic than a teenage boy? Or did it mean something else altogether? The chanting stopped, and I no longer saw the Volto. A stewardess stood in the aisle. "Please place your hand on the back of your neck, and then hold it up with your palm facing towards me," she said. We all did so. My wife looked up at her palm and mine. "Nothing," she said. "I guess you won't really need it, but you never know." "What does that mean?" I said. "4," the stewardess said. "4 chosen." "Please finish what was started." The palms of the 4 passengers had blood on them. Swarms of daggers surrounded them, and there was no talk, no coordination. It just happened. But I stood back. I wouldn't take part in something violent and destructive simply because it was expected of me. I never again wanted to destroy a deformed bull, let alone the human equivalent. My wife, her mask splattered with blood as well as her dagger, found me. "You need to join in," she said. "No," I said. I expected her to argue, to have some cutting remark that made me feel obligated, but she said nothing. She took my dagger and handed me her bloody one, and ran back into the crowd of mass murderers. We were at gate 53, and my wife guided me back up the stairs we'd come down, slower this time. "Why are we back here?" I said. "I thought we were traveling somewhere." "We are somewhere," she said. "Somewhere different," I said. "The possibilities of where we now stand are different than before," she said. "We passed through the employees-only door into a busy terminal." "Best of luck to you," she said. She kissed me then, the woman who I thought was my wife, but wasn't. I remembered then meeting her hours ago. She had walked up to me, said that she needed something from me. Before I could ask what, she had kissed me, and for some reason, I thought that we were married. We were just going on a trip. I remembered my real life, my family. I had forgot things too. I now knew more about the masks, the ritual, where we were before she kissed me. I had so many questions that I wanted to ask her, but she was gone. I stood alone in an airport terminal, near an employees-only door,